Her father filled the doorway like a verdict. Emily, we don't have that kind of money just lying around. You have to be realistic. His arms were folded, jaw tight. Behind him, her mother hovered, supportive but not enough to go against him. The kitchen table between them was buried in medical bills, insurance letters, printouts from specialists. The number circled in red, $85,000, sat in the middle like a threat. That was the price of the experimental treatment. That was the price of time. In the bedroom, Ethan slept with the soft, broken sound of someone whose lungs were tired. The oxygen machine hissed steadily. He was 7, too young to understand that adults could choose not to save him. Realistic? Emily repeated, throat burning. Dad, the doctor said he has maybe 6 months. This treatment is the only thing left. Her mother stepped forward, doing that gentle pat on the arm thing she always did when she wanted to soothe without actually helping. Honey, we've already done so much. We paid for 3 surgeries. We can't just drain our retirement. I'm not asking you to drain it alone. I'll pay it back. I'll get a second job. I'll work nights. Her father didn't waver. You're already drowning, Em. How are you going to pay us back? You need to look into financing. Hospitals have plans. I did, she said, voice dropping. They won't approve me. And the ones that might, by the time they process it, it'll be too late. They looked at her like she was asking for something indulgent, like she wanted a holiday, not a heartbeat. You're our daughter, her mother said softly, but we also have to think about getting older. Older, retirement, golf, vacations, all things that now apparently outranked keeping her son alive. So that's it? Emily asked. You're saying no? Her father's expression didn't soften. We can't do it. They left with practiced sympathy and the comfortable certainty of people who believed their decision was reasonable. Emily stood at the window and watched their car drive away, a perfect little suburban unit returning to their house 20 minutes away, her childhood room still preserved for the healthy daughter who stayed, not the one who needed help. The apartment was suddenly too quiet. She walked to Ethan's room and sat beside him. His chest rose unevenly, his hair, damped with sleep, stuck to his forehead. He looked peaceful. He looked doomed. I'm trying, buddy. I promise I'm trying. That night, she started calling everyone, cousins, an aunt in Cleveland, her mom's older sister. Some sent $100. One sent $500 with a wish it could be more. It all helped. It also wasn't even close. She was trying to build a life raft out of bottle caps. But underneath the panic, something harder than grief began to settle. Not rage yet, just understanding. Her parents hadn't said, we can't. They had said, we won't. When family chooses comfort over blood, the story stops being about need and starts being about consequence. 3 days later, Emily's phone buzzed while she was refilling prescriptions at the pharmacy. This is Dr. Alvarez. I just wanted to check whether you've decided on the treatment plan. She hesitated, pen frozen midair. I'm still trying to arrange the funds. There was a pause, heavy and clinical. I understand, but please remember, Ethan's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. The earlier we begin, the higher the success rate. After hanging up, she stood still, surrounded by the hum of customers and the smell of antiseptic. Every passing minute now felt like currency she didn't have. That night, she pulled out a notepad and started calculating. If she sold the car, picked up extra shifts, maybe borrowed on her credit card, she could cover a quarter of the cost. Still not enough. Then she saw a message from her friend Maya blinking on the phone screen. You still doing that GoFundMe idea? I'll share it if you do. Emily had resisted it before. Something about begging online felt humiliating. But now pride seemed like an expensive luxury. She wrote for 3 hours, drafting, deleting, rewriting until the post felt raw enough to be true.
My son Ethan is 7. He loves dinosaurs and hates broccoli. He also has a rare genetic condition. The treatment costs $85,000. I've sold everything I can. I'm asking for help because I'm out of time." She uploaded photos. Ethan in his favorite T-Rex pajamas, Ethan holding a papier-mâché volcano, and pressed post. By morning, the fundraiser had $1,200. By evening, $5,000. Messages poured in, old classmates, strangers, even one of Ethan's nurses. Hope returned in digital increments. Then came a call from a number she didn't know. "Is this Emily Carter? I saw your campaign. I run a podcast about medical crowdfunding stories. Would you be open to sharing your experience?" She almost said no, but the woman's tone wasn't exploitative, it was curious, almost kind. And exposure meant donations. The next day, Emily sat in front of a borrowed microphone, voice trembling as she spoke about watching her son fight for air, about hearing the word terminal for the first time, about parents who couldn't help. When the episode went live, the response was overwhelming, both beautiful and cruel. Some messages offered prayers and donations. Others accused her of being irresponsible, of guilt-tripping her parents, of emotional manipulation. She ignored the hate. The total climbed to $32,000. Still short, but suddenly possible. That night, Ethan asked, "Mom, are we winning?" She smiled through tears. "We're trying, sweetheart, and trying's how people win." But deep down, she knew the internet was fickle. One wrong headline, one new viral story, and the flood would stop. She couldn't afford that, not when time was bleeding away. When desperation meets the spotlight, compassion and cruelty often share the same audience.
2 weeks passed. The total stalled at $46,870. It might as well have been zero. The comments had slowed, the shares had plateaued, and Emily's messages to influencers went unread. The digital applause had faded into static. Meanwhile, Ethan's cough had deepened, and his smiles came less often. Every beep from the oxygen monitor felt like a countdown. One night, when she thought he was asleep, he whispered, "Mom, if I get better, can we go to the ocean?" She nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, baby, we'll build the biggest sandcastle in the world." After he drifted off, she opened her laptop again, scrolling through donation pages. Then she stopped. A man named Anonymous had donated $10,000 with a message. "No child should pay for the world's mistakes. Keep fighting." She blinked at the screen. The profile was empty. No photo, no history, but the payment was real. Within hours, the donation went viral again. News sites picked it up. Stranger donates $10,000 to save child's life. The story reignited. New followers, new sympathy, new hope. By the end of the week, the total reached $86,200. Enough. Emily fell to her knees in the kitchen, sobbing into her hands. She booked the treatment the same day. But just as she was about to finalize the payment, an email arrived from the crowdfunding platform. "We regret to inform you that a significant donation has been flagged for potential fraud. Funds will be temporarily held pending verification." The world froze. She called support, waited through 2 hours of elevator music, and finally reached someone. "Ma'am, the $10,000 came from a flagged account. We're investigating. You'll get an update within 30 days. 30 days, she whispered. "He doesn't have 30 days. "I'm sorry," the voice said, mechanical and detached. "It's protocol." The next morning, she visited the hospital anyway. Dr. Alvarez met her with weary sympathy. "We can't start without payment confirmation, Emily. I wish there was something else we could do." She walked out of the hospital into cold wind and the kind of silence that hurts your ears. At home, Ethan's drawing lay on the fridge. 2 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. Me and Mommy at the beach. She pressed her forehead against the paper.
"We'll get there," she whispered. "I'll find a way." And then, almost involuntarily, a different kind of thought surfaced. A dangerous, forbidden one. Her father's safe. The business account. The house. The retirement savings he was protecting. The world had taken everything polite from her. What remained was instinct. When mercy runs out, even love can turn into something sharp enough to steal. The idea didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in fragments, tiny, disjointed thoughts that she pushed away until they started to make sense. Her parents were leaving for a week-long cruise. Her father had bragged about it on Facebook. Finally taking a break, 7 days in the Caribbean, earned it. Their house would be empty, secure, but not impenetrable. Emily told herself it wasn't stealing. It was borrowing from the future that her father wanted to protect, a future that would mean nothing if Ethan didn't have one. She started planning quietly. She remembered where he hid the spare key, under the fake rock beside the garage. She knew the alarm code. It hadn't changed since she lived there. The day before they left, she drove by the house just to confirm. The lawn was trimmed, the lights on timers. Everything looked perfect, like their lives. That night, she stared at Ethan sleeping and whispered, "Mommy is going to fix this, okay? You just rest." When the house lights went out the next evening, she waited 2 hours, then drove over with gloves, a flashlight, and a steady pulse that didn't feel like her own. The key fit smoothly. The code beeped once, then silence. Her father's office was exactly as she remembered. Mahogany desk, framed diplomas, the smell of old cigars. The safe was behind the painting of the lake house. Combination 16-8-25, his anniversary. Inside, stacks of envelopes neatly arranged. Bonds, cash, documents. She didn't even count, just took what looked like enough and left everything else untouched. By the time she got home, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely lock the door. She sat on the floor beside Ethan's bed, the envelope open, bills fanned out like paper wings. $12,000. Enough to cover the hold, enough to start treatment. For 3 days, peace returned. Ethan laughed again. The machine hissed like a lullaby, not a countdown. But peace is fragile when it's built on secrets. On Friday morning, her phone rang. It was her father. The voice on the other end wasn't angry. It was cold, surgical. "Emily, someone broke into our house." She froze. They didn't take much, just cash from the safe, no forced entry, which makes me think it was someone who knew us. Silence stretched like a noose. "I'll ask one time. Was it you?" Emily's throat closed. Words wouldn't come. The line stayed open long enough for both of them to understand that silence was an answer. He didn't yell. That made it worse. Her father's silence lingered like smoke, heavy and suffocating. The next morning, he was standing at her apartment door. He looked older, colder. His eyes scanned the living room, the machines, the stacks of medical forms. Ethan's laughter from the other room sliced through the tension, like an echo of innocence neither of them could afford anymore. "I want to see him," he said. Emily nodded mutely. He stepped into the room, watching his grandson's frail body curled beneath a blanket covered in dinosaurs. The oxygen tube hissed softly. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Grandpa." The old man's face cracked for a second, just a flicker, before hardening again. He turned back to Emily. "You took from me." "I borrowed," she said quietly. "I'll pay it back." He shook his head. "You broke into my house. You stole." Her voice trembled. "I did it to save him. Do you think I don't love him?" His tone wasn't angry. It was something far worse. Disappointed. "You had a choice. You could have come to me again and we could have found a way." She laughed bitterly. "A way? You said no. That was your way." The argument died in his throat. For a long time, neither spoke. The beeping of the oxygen monitor filled the silence. Finally, he exhaled. "How much?" she said. "Enough to start treatment." He rubbed his face. "If I report it, you go to jail. If I don't, your mother will never forgive me." Her heart hammered. "Please, Dad. Just this once. Let it go." He studied her, the daughter he'd raised to be strong, not desperate. Then he looked back at Ethan. The little boy was watching cartoons, oblivious to the storm. Her father turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I'll make sure he gets what he needs. But this breaks something that doesn't heal." When the door shut, Emily felt no victory, just exhaustion. She went to Ethan, brushing his hair gently. "We're going to the hospital Monday, buddy." He smiled, weak but genuine. "Thanks, Mom." For the first time in months, there was light in his eyes. 3 days later, the treatment began. The first round was brutal. Nausea, fever, tears, but Ethan endured it with a courage that dwarfed hers. And, slowly, miraculously, he started to breathe easier. Nurses whispered that he was responding better than expected. Dr. Alvarez smiled more. Emily dared to believe. But every time she saw her father's number flash on the phone, guilt twisted like a blade. She couldn't answer, not yet, not until Ethan was safe. When he finally called again, his voice was quiet. "The police asked about the break-in. I told them it was a misunderstanding. Don't make me regret that." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." "I didn't do it for you," he said softly. "I did it for him." Forgiveness is easy when it's owed, but unbearable when it's undeserved.
Weeks blurred into a rhythm of hospital corridors, coffee cups, and whispered prayers. The doctors called Ethan's progress remarkable. His lungs were stronger, his color returning, his laughter echoing again in the sterile white room. Emily lived between gratitude and dread, thankful for every heartbeat, terrified it could still stop. One afternoon, she stepped outside for air. The hospital courtyard buzzed with distant laughter. Families eating lunch, a little girl chasing pigeons. Emily watched them, her chest tight with envy. For them, joy was routine. For her, it was borrowed. Her phone buzzed, a message from her father. "Your mother knows." Her stomach dropped. A moment later, the phone rang. She hesitated, then answered. "Emily?" Her mother's voice trembled with something between anger and grief. "You went into our home? You took from us?" "And T, you should have told me. I would have helped." "You didn't," Emily snapped before she could stop herself. "You both walked away." Silence, then a quiet sob. "I didn't think you'd actually—" Her voice cracked. "You could have gone to prison." Emily's throat tightened. "Would that be worse than watching him die?" Her mother didn't respond. The line went dead. That night, Emily sat beside Ethan as he slept. Moonlight brushing his face, the steady rhythm of his breathing was the only sound in the room. She whispered, "You're my whole world, kiddo." Then she noticed something. A small folded note tucked under Ethan's dinosaur pillow. She opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. "Emma and T, I heard Grandpa. I don't want you to be sad. You're my hero." Tears welled in her eyes. How could someone so small understand sacrifice better than the adults around him? The next morning, she called her father. "Dad," she said, voice steady, "I'll pay you back, every cent." He sighed. "Don't bother. Money's the least of what you owe." "I know," she whispered. Then he surprised her. "Your mother wants to see you. Dinner. Sunday. No police, no lectures."
She hesitated. Why? Because she misses her daughter. And maybe, he paused, because she finally understands what you did. On Sunday, Emily walked into the familiar house, different now, heavier with memory. Her mother was at the table, tears already in her eyes. No words, just an embrace that broke them both open. Her father joined quietly, setting down an envelope. We cashed out a bond for the rest of his treatment. You won't need to fight alone. Emily's breath caught. Why? He looked at her, tired, proud, resigned. Because you reminded me what family is supposed to mean. She pressed her hands to her face, sobbing. Ethan would live, but nothing would ever return to how it was before. Sometimes salvation costs more than money. It costs who you were before you earned it.
Months passed, and the world slowly tilted back towards something resembling normal. Ethan's checkups showed steady improvement. Lungs clear, energy returning, laughter full. The doctors called him a miracle case. Emily called him proof that love, when cornered, becomes unstoppable. They moved into a smaller apartment closer to the hospital. She picked up part-time shifts again, this time with purpose instead of panic. The bills were still there, but now they meant something worth paying for. Every week, her father stopped by, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with silence. They didn't talk about that night. It hovered between them, unspoken, like a scar they both carried but refused to touch. One evening, after Ethan went to bed, he lingered at the door. "You're doing good, Em," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Trying to?" He hesitated, then added, "You remind me of your mother when you were little. Stubborn, emotional, reckless. You got that from her." She laughed softly. "And the guilt from you." He almost smiled. "Maybe that's fair." They stood there a moment, not as adversaries, but as two people who had learned the hard way that family doesn't always mean agreement. It means survival. Later that night, Emily scrolled through the old fundraiser page. It was still up, frozen in digital time. The headline read, "Help save Ethan Carter's life. Every dollar counts." Below it, thousands of names. Messages from strangers who had shared her pain, her desperation, her fight. She read one comment again and again. "Your courage makes the rest of us braver." For the first time, she believed it might be true. She thought about how easily she could have been a villain in someone else's version of this story. A thief, a liar, a desperate mother who crossed a line. But the truth was simpler and messier all at once. She was human. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Alvarez. "Ethan's final scans look excellent. You did it, Emily. He's in remission." Her knees buckled. Tears spilled. She whispered, "We did it, buddy." She walked into Ethan's room. He was awake, playing with a toy truck. "Hey, Mom," he said. "When can we go to the beach?" She laughed through tears. "Soon. Real soon." He grinned. "Can Grandpa come?" Emily paused. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think he'd like that." Outside, dawn began to rise, painting the sky in gold. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel trapped by time or money, just grateful for breath, for second chances, for all the broken pieces that had somehow built a new life. In the end, it wasn't the money that saved Ethan. It was the price his mother was willing to pay for hope.
2 years later, the beach finally happened. Ethan ran ahead, barefoot, the wind turning his hair wild again. He scooped up wet sand and laughed when the waves chased him back. His lungs were clear. His body was alive in ways Emily had only dreamed of. She stood watching, her parents a few steps behind, under a striped umbrella. They had come without argument this time. No tension, no ledger of what was owed. just quiet understanding. Her father handed her a coffee. "Still don't like crowds?" She smiled. "Still don't like talking about feelings?" He chuckled, the sound of a man trying to unlearn being right all the time. "Guess we're both works in progress." They watched Ethan build a crooked castle that leaned against the tide. Her mother knelt beside him, helping shape the towers. For a moment, the past didn't exist. Later, as the sun dipped low, Emily walked alone along the shore. She thought about everything the journey had taken from her: trust, naivete, peace, and everything it had given back: strength, clarity, a son who still laughed. The world had taught her something brutal and beautiful. You don't always get to be the hero in your own story. Sometimes you survive by being the villain in someone else's. She picked up a shell and tossed it into the waves. It disappeared without a sound, like so many of the things she'd lost along the way. A voice called from behind, "Mom, come help!" Ethan was grinning, hands covered in sand. His castle half collapsed. "Needs reinforcement!" he shouted. Emily laughed and ran to him. Together they built again, stronger, taller, learning where the walls needed to be thicker. Her father snapped a photo. 3 generations caught in one frame: the thief, the judge, and the reason. That night, after they returned to the small rental house by the coast, Emily fell asleep with sand still in her hair. Emily sat by the window, listening to the waves. Her mother joined her, quietly setting a cup of tea on the table. "You did what you had to do," her mother said. It wasn't approval, not exactly, it was acceptance. Emily nodded. "I just wish it had cost less." Her mother looked toward the bedroom where Ethan slept. Everything worth saving costs something. Outside, the tide rolled in and out, erasing footprints, reshaping the shore. Emily realized that's what life did too. It never really healed. It reshaped what remained. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the sea fill the room. For the first time in years, there was no fear in it, only the steady rhythm of a story that had found its ending. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning. It's about surviving with enough love left to begin again.
The sea was calm that evening, too calm, as if it was holding its breath. Emily stood on the porch of the beach house, watching Ethan play near the water. He was stronger now, faster too, chasing waves like they were secrets he could finally catch. His laughter echoed against the fading orange sky. Her father sat behind her, reading the paper, though his eyes weren't really on the print. Her mother was in the kitchen humming, the smell of something sweet drifting through the window. For once, everything looked ordinary, and that terrified her, because normal had never lasted in her life. Normal was a mirage, beautiful, fragile, and always about to disappear. The phone buzzed, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? This is Detective Mallory with the County Police Department." Her body stiffened. "Yes? I'm calling regarding the break-in at your parents' property 2 years ago. A case review turned up some inconsistencies. We may need a formal statement from you." Her breath caught. I thought that case was closed." "Officially, it was, but we've recently discovered financial activity connected to that incident. If you could come in next week, that would help us resolve a few things." He hung up before she could respond. She stood frozen, the sound of waves crashing somewhere far away. She turned toward her father. He looked up from his chair, already knowing. "You got the call too?" she whispered. He folded the paper slow and deliberate. "They reached out to me yesterday." Her throat tightened.
You didn't tell me? I wanted you to have this weekend, with him, he said softly. Dad, he looked out at the horizon. I told them I handled it, but there are limits to what even silence can protect, Emily. She walked to the railing, gripping it hard. The sun was sinking fast, dragging the light with it. Ethan was still laughing, unaware of the storm gathering behind him. I did everything for him, she said. He didn't know if they were just empty words or if they held the weight of all her actions. He nodded, and I never doubted that. But life doesn't always care why we sin, only that we did. Tears blurred her vision. What happens now? He stood, walking to her side. You go in. You tell the truth. Whatever comes after, we'll handle it together. She looked at him, really looked, and realized this was the first time he had ever said we and meant it. Out on the shore, Ethan waved. Mom, look, the castle is still standing. She forced a smile, whispering, Yeah, baby, for now. As the tide rose, washing away the footprints one by one, Emily finally understood. Saving a life doesn't always mean saving yourself. Some debts aren't paid with money, they're paid with the truth, when the world finally comes to collect.
The courthouse smelled like old wood and fear. Emily sat alone on the wooden bench outside courtroom 3B, hands clasped so tightly they ached. The walls around her were lined with portraits of judges who looked carved from the same stone that weighed down her chest. Her father had offered to come, but she told him no. She didn't want Ethan to see her like this, didn't want him to remember his mother as someone sitting in front of a judge. She'd already made a deal with the prosecutor. Full restitution, cooperation, and community service. No jail time. But guilt didn't care about leniency. It just stayed, heavy, constant, deserved. When her name was called, she stood. Her voice didn't shake as she entered her plea. Yes, Your Honor. I accept full responsibility. The gavel's sound echoed like a closing door. Afterwards, outside, her father was waiting anyway. He looked tired but relieved, a small smile ghosting his face. It's over, he said. She shook her head. Not yet. He frowned. You did what you had to do. No, she said quietly. I did what I thought I had to. That's not the same thing. He didn't argue. He just placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of peace, maybe even forgiveness. Months passed. The media moved on, the story buried under newer tragedies. Emily completed her service at a local shelter, filing papers, helping families with emergency funds, holding the hands of mothers who reminded her too much of herself. One evening, a woman came in with a sick child. She was crying, clutching a bill she couldn't pay. Emily looked at her, saw her own desperation reflected back. She walked to the donation box by the counter and slipped in her week's pay. When the woman protested, Emily just smiled. Someone once helped me. It's my turn. The woman whispered, God bless you. Emily nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed in God anymore, only in consequence, and sometimes in grace. A year later, Ethan stood on a small stage at his school's science fair, holding up a model of human lungs made from balloons and straws. This, he said proudly, is how my mom saved my life. Applause filled the room. Emily sat in the front row, tears blurring her vision. Her father was beside her, clapping until his hands turned red. When Ethan finished, he ran straight into her arms. She held him close, breathing in the scent of soap and crayons and everything pure she'd almost lost. Outside, the world went on, people hurrying, cars honking, lives unfolding. But for once, Emily didn't feel behind. She'd already paid the price. Sometimes redemption doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you to live with the echoes and still choose love anyway.
5 years later,
The new wing of St. Vincent Children's Hospital gleamed under the morning sun. Above the entrance hung a simple plaque, the Ethan Carter Foundation, because every child deserves a chance. Emily stood beneath it, adjusting the microphone with steady hands. She had spent 3 years rebuilding what she had broken: her record, her career, her faith in herself. The foundation had started with small crowdfunding workshops for families like hers, then grew into a charity fund that partnered with hospitals nationwide. Her father was there too, sitting in the front row, his hair now silver, his hands clasped around a photo of Ethan at the beach. He still called her kiddo, but the word no longer carried disappointment, only respect. When the crowd quieted, Emily spoke. 5 years ago, I was just a mother with nothing left to lose, she said. I crossed lines I can't erase. But the truth is, when love runs out of legal options, people start creating their own. I don't justify what I did, but I also can't pretend it didn't save him. A pause. A soft breeze shifted the microphone's cords. Today isn't about guilt. It's about building systems so no one else has to make that choice. Applause rose, not loud, but sincere. She glanced at Ethan, now 12, healthy, grinning, wearing a tie crooked like his grandfather's. He looked so alive, it hurt to remember how close he'd come to fading. After the ceremony, reporters approached her. "Emily," one asked, "do you regret what you did?" She smiled tiredly. "Yes," she said. "Every day. Just not for the reason you think. I regret that our world makes a mother choose between law and love." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kiddo." "We did," she replied. That night, they walked along the same shore where Ethan had once built his first castle. The waves rolled softly, the air smelled of salt and forgiveness. Ethan looked up at her. "Mom, when I grow up, can I be a doctor?" She laughed. "You can be anything." He nodded. "Then I'll save kids so you don't have to worry anymore." Her eyes filled, but this time they didn't burn. They shone.
10 years after the night she opened her father's safe, the world finally caught up to Emily's heart. Her story had become a case study in ethics classes and crowdfunding conferences. People debated her name on panels, some calling her reckless, others calling her brave. But Emily herself had stopped debating long ago. Every morning, she walked through the glass doors of the Ethan Carter Foundation, where a photo of her son, older now, smiling in his high school uniform, hung above the reception desk. Beneath it, a quote she'd chosen herself. "Hope isn't a gift, it's a rebellion." She worked quietly, overseeing grants, ensuring that parents never had to choose between legality and love again. Hospitals now partnered with her foundation to fast-track emergency cases. Every approval form she signed felt like a small undoing of the past. One afternoon, she found a letter on her desk with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. "Dear Emily, I've been watching the work you're doing. Your mother would be proud. I was wrong about many things, mostly about what matters most. If I could go back, I'd have said yes sooner. Love, Dad." She pressed the paper to her chest, tears sliding down with a quiet that felt like release. That evening, she and Ethan drove to the coast. He was nearly 17 now, taller than her, his voice still carrying traces of the boy who once asked about the ocean. They walked along the same shoreline where everything changed years ago. The tide whispered its endless story, taking, returning, forgiving. Ethan said, kicking at the sand, "When I start college, will people know what you did?" She smiled faintly. "Some will, most won't.
Does it bother you? He shook his head. No, I just think maybe they should, because you saved me. She brushed his hair from his eyes. I don't need the world to know. I just need you to remember what it cost and why it was worth it. They stood in silence, the horizon glowing gold. When the first wave reached their feet, Ethan whispered, So, this is where it started. She nodded. And where it ended. And maybe where it begins again. He grinned. Then we should build another castle. They knelt together, shaping towers of sand that leaned and crumbled, only to be rebuilt stronger, just like them. As dusk fell, Emily realized that redemption wasn't about erasing her past. It was about making peace with the parts of her that refused to die. The world had taken her to the edge, but from that edge, she had built something that would outlive her. The woman who once stole for love ended up creating a world where love never had to steal again.
10 years after the night she opened her father's safe, the world finally caught up to Emily's heart. Her story had become a case study in ethics classes and crowdfunding conferences. People debated her name on panels, some calling her reckless, others calling her brave. But Emily herself had stopped debating long ago. Every morning, she walked through the glass doors of the Ethan Carter Foundation, where a photo of her son, older now, smiling in his high school uniform, hung above the reception desk. Beneath it, a quote she'd chosen herself. Hope isn't a gift, it's a rebellion. She worked quietly, overseeing grants, ensuring that parents never had to choose between legality and love again. Hospitals now partnered with her foundation to fast-track emergency cases. Every approval form she signed felt like a small undoing of the past. One afternoon, she found a letter on her desk with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. Dear Emily, I've been watching the work you're doing. Your mother would be proud. I was wrong about many things, mostly about what matters most. If I could go back, I'd have said yes sooner. Love, Dad. She pressed the paper to her chest, tears sliding down with a quiet that felt like release. That evening, she and Ethan drove to the coast. He was nearly 17 now, taller than her, his voice still carrying traces of the boy who once asked about the ocean. They walked along the same shoreline where everything changed years ago. The tide whispered its endless story, taking, returning, forgiving. Ethan said, kicking at the sand, When I start college, will people know what you did? She smiled faintly. Some will, most won't. Does it bother you? He shook his head. No, I just think maybe they should, because you saved me. She brushed his hair from his eyes. I don't need the world to know. I just need you to remember what it cost and why it was worth it. They stood in silence, the horizon glowing gold. When the first wave reached their feet, Ethan whispered, So, this is where it started. She nodded. And where it ended. And maybe where it begins again. He grinned. Then we should build another castle. They knelt together, shaping towers of sand that leaned and crumbled, only to be rebuilt stronger, just like them. As dusk fell, Emily realized that redemption wasn't about erasing her past. It was about making peace with the parts of her that refused to die. The world had taken her to the edge, but from that edge, she had built something that would outlive her. The woman who once stole for love ended up creating a world where love never had to steal again.
The evening breeze off the water smelled of salt and memory. Emily sat on the weather-worn bench facing the ocean, the same one she'd discovered years earlier when she thought hope was something you begged for. Now she understood. It was something you built and rebuilt, like a stubborn tide. Ethan was at university 3 hours away. Every Sunday, he called. Every Sunday, he asked if she was still going to the shore. She always said yes. "It reminds me that everything we lost found its way back," she would tell him. Tonight, the sky was streaked with violet and copper, the sun lowering like an exhausted promise. Emily opened the small notebook she carried everywhere. The first page held her father's letter. The rest were filled with notes from families her foundation had helped, tiny testaments written in trembling gratitude. "You saved my daughter. We got our surgery. Thank you for seeing us when no one else did." Each message was a scar turned into scripture. She heard footsteps crunching over sand. Turning, she saw a young mother holding a sleeping child wrapped in a faded blanket. The woman smiled shyly. "Are you Mrs. Carter? The hospital said I should thank you in person." Emily rose. "You don't have to thank me," she said gently. "But I want to. We were out of options. The foundation came through in 2 days." The woman's eyes glistened. "I was ready to do anything, even things I shouldn't. You gave me time." Her throat tightened. "Then make it count." The woman nodded and left, her child's tiny hand dangling in peace. Emily watched them go, realizing she'd just met her younger self, and for once, she didn't feel pity. She felt pride. Later that night, as waves brushed the shore, Emily took out her phone and opened a message from Ethan. "Hey, Mom. Med school orientation was wild. They asked why I chose pediatrics. I told them my mom saved my life. Hope you're proud." Her laugh came out as a sob. She typed back, "Always. Keep building castles." She slipped the phone into her bag and looked at the ocean one last time. The moonlight danced across the water, endless and forgiving. Somewhere behind her, the wind rustled through the dunes, whispering the names of all the people she'd once thought she'd failed. Tomorrow, she'd return to the city, to her office, her mission, her quiet rebellion. But tonight, she let herself simply exist, not as the woman who stole, not as the mother who begged, not even as the founder who redeemed, just Emily, human and whole. The waves erased her footprints again, but this time she didn't mind, because the legacy she'd built would never wash away.
It was spring again in the city, and the first light painted the foundation building gold. Emily walked through the corridor, her heels soft against the marble, the hum of morning volunteers already filling the air. A new wing was opening today, the Pediatric Research Lab, funded entirely by donations from the families she'd once helped. She paused beneath a mural of ocean waves. At its base was a brass plate inscribed, "Dedicated to the mothers who refused to stop fighting." It still startled her to realize that mother now meant more than herself. It meant hundreds of women who had called her late at night, whispering panic into the phone until she told them, "You're not alone." In her office, Ethan waited in a white coat, clipboard in hand, first-year med student intern, and the youngest on the team. "Ready for the tour, Dr. Carter?" she teased. He grinned. "Almost. I still feel weird when people call me that. You'll get used to it. People used to call me that woman from the news. Now they just call me boss." He laughed, the sound warm and easy. Before they left, he placed a folded envelope on her desk. "It came this morning, from the state board." She frowned, opening it. Inside was a single line on official letterhead. "All records related to the Carter versus State case are hereby expunged." Her breath caught. 10 years of shadow, finally lifted. Ethan squeezed her hand. "You're free, Mom." "I already was, the moment you started breathing again." During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Emily looked out at the crowd. Doctors, donors, families, her father seated proudly in the front row. For once, no one saw a criminal or a scandal. They saw what she'd built from the ashes of her choices.
When it was her turn to speak, she kept it short. Once, I thought redemption was something you earned. Now I know it's something you give forward. Every child saved here is proof that mistakes can plant seeds that bloom into mercy. Applause rose like a tide. She caught her father's eye. He mouthed, "Proud of you." And the years of distance between them finally felt gone. That night, long after everyone had left, Emily stood in the lab doorway watching Ethan work. He moved with quiet focus, adjusting vials and monitors with hands steadier than hers had ever been. For the first time, she let herself imagine a future untouched by guilt, a life defined not by what she had taken, but by what she had returned. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady, washing the city clean. She whispered to the dark glass, "Maybe this is what forgiveness really sounds like." The woman who once broke the law for love built a legacy where compassion became the law itself.